you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Good morning and welcome to the April the 12th edition of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. So we'd like to start off by saying thank you for listening to the program. We have a good program planned today for you, so that you are a participant, and being that you would like to be a participant, or assuming that you would like to be a participant, you can call this number 516-453-9921 to get in contact with the show. And I say this every week, but there have been some that go overboard on this, but we're asking you again, please be brief. I've had a lot of Gmails about people complaining that some of the people, when you ask your question, you ramble, you go on and on and on, and you lose content of whatever it is that you're trying to say. Just ask a simple question so that Mr. Fuller can can answer your question, and you have to realize that Mr. Fuller uses logic, cause and effect, so that means that he has employed the use of examples to make sure that he gets whatever point that he's trying to make it across. And he will ask you from time to time, did that answer your question? Because he wants to be sure. Because the one thing that we don't want is confusion. We're looking for constructive results. So when you do that, call in. Make sure you give your name to the call person. Now, someone suggested that in order to be brief, that you might want to give the call screener some information on what you're calling about. I don't know if that is exactly going to work, but just ask your questions and please be mindful, be brief. We only have 2 hours here. Okay. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. It probably won't be read on today's program, but there's a possibility that it could be, but keep that in mind. And also, you can go to the chat room and get on that by going to blogtalkradio.com. You want to go under, I think the listing is programs, and you want to produce just this show. Once you click that, then there's a little box where you can join the chat room. And one of the things that the chat room people or a person in the chat room, Constructive Actions Items, has taken upon the task of doing this, giving you a review of last week's show for discussions, and the discussions are lively. One of them was the study and implement of the 10 stops, which is in the book that Mr. Fuller will be talking about later on in the program. In fact, the program is designed around the book that you can get by going to producejustice.com, and you will hear that throughout the program. producejustice.com. All the information that you need is on that side, including when Mr. Fuller will be on the Carl Nelson Show. That will be on there. We have our own Facebook page for Mr. Fuller, and announcements are on there, and the shows are on there too. Okay, so you have your instructions. Wait a minute, Justice Warrior, the same principle should apply to the callers. It's not just the Gmailers. Those of us in the chat room who are long-winded. Yeah, okay, I wasn't aware of that. Chat roomers, chatters, don't be long-winded in that either. Justice Warrior has pointed that out. Okay, without further ado, let's get on with today's program, and let's start off by introducing to some and presenting to others Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. And as my custom is, at least most of the time, is starting off by asking Mr. Fuller, how are you?
I'm still learning.
You are still learning. Okay, very, very good. Okay, last week, Mr. Fuller, you struck a chord among the listeners, and my Gmail and email went off the just blew up by the comment that you made about CRT. They loved what you had to say about it. You said that you had taken, I believe you said you had taken notes and you had comments on that. And just to start off today's program, if you have those notes in front of you, or if you can recall what you said about CRT, there are many that would like to hear that, and some of them have their recordings ready because they want to hear what you have to say about that. So if you will, Mr. Fuller, can you repeat what your take is on the CRT?
Well, it's just a matter of taking the CRT and looking like I was doing. I thought of the idea, CRT. And they say critical race theory, and everybody's going around talking about it who has heard it, so they talk about it, and it keeps getting vaguer and vaguer, or whatever you want to use that term. Just more adds to the confusion, because some of the people who said they were involved in originating the term didn't actually use that term. That just kind of came out of nowhere. I've heard all kind of different stories about it. So, you know, if you're trying to solve a problem, first thing you do is get clarity about what problem are you trying to solve. It doesn't make any difference how you frame it. Do you have a problem? Or either you do or you don't. And so people come up with different phrases, different types of slangs, different types of terms that just appear, and then the terms themselves, which are supposed to be explanatory about whatever is going on, just become more and more convoluted, more and more complicated. So I was asking the question, well, what actually is CRT, and what is it, and what is it not? You know, if you can't figure out what it is, maybe you can figure out what it isn't, and then kind of close in on it from both sides until you figure out what it's all about in essence, or what's going on. I mean, why is everybody stuck like a barge on a boat in the mud, and we can't go forward because we can't agree on what the term means and what it's supposed to mean, and right back to what problem are we trying to solve? Are we trying to solve a problem of how words are used? Or are we trying to solve a problem of trying to solve whatever the problem is? Now, we have a race problem, we're told, and why have we got to run aground or get stuck on a term like CRT, and what has that got to do with the problem? And they say it's got everything to do with the problem. Okay, so has it got everything to do with the problem? What is it? Well, different people say different things about different people, like whom? Saying different things like what? I mean, we're still trying to be focused on a problem, I thought. So I just joined the rest of the crowd, saying, what is CRT? And so I said, hey, compensatory logic is about cutting to the chase. And so I said, okay, since CRT looks like it's here to stay, and everybody's going around in circles with it, it seems to be that way, let's just come up with a bunch of CRTs. Maybe that will help our way out of it. And who's going to be the authority on it? Well, anybody who wants to come up with something called CRT. That's the logical process, since nobody can agree on what it is and what it isn't exactly. And so it has to do with somehow solving the race problem. Okay, so I just start fishing around with how many different things can you say in the dictionary that start with C? How many different things you can say in the dictionary, the standard dictionary, that start a word that starts with the letter R? And how many different ways can you use whatever's in the T section of the dictionary? A whole lot of words that start with the letter T. So you just put them, go through the C's and the R's and the T's. I just sample. I just flip through the dictionary, just picking out, whatever page I turn to in the C section. And then how many words are in the C? So you can just, everybody can just join that club and just call CRT anything you want to. So I just thought I'd sample it. That's how that got started at the end of last week. I was doing it while I was really on the air. I just thought of it. I said, CRT. Well, why is everybody so, up in arms and whatnot, having arguments, seminars about it, and everything's just lost in translation? What are we trying to do? So I said, crying racial tears. Okay, how about that one? Okay, because they said that's what a lot of white people are upset about with CRT, critical race theory. Well, it causes my children to getting upset. So they get upset enough to cry about it? Well, they just might. So CRT, crying racial tears. Okay? All right, so you don't want to cry racial tears, I don't guess. That's not solving anything, crying about it. So try to come up with an antidote. Well, Fuller, you're supposed to be coming up with stuff, compensatory code. So I say, okay, let's eliminate crying racial tears with counter-racist truth. You're crying racial tears, so what will eliminate crying the racial tears? Or you can say constructive results truth. Now, that's still in CRT, all right? That's not critical race theory, but you can just say, rather than say CRT is critical race theory, you say counter-racist truth. That's CRT too, okay? And then come up with maybe 2 or 3 dozen CRTs. Maybe we'll find something there that most white people, to get rid of the CRT that says crying racial tears, we can get rid of that, which is something I came up with, and say, okay, how do you get rid of the crying racial tears? Say, well, just more constructive results truth, or CRT counter-racist truth, or just, add as many as you want to until you finally come up with bingo. This is the one that everybody can agree on, and we can now solve the problem, which is the race problem, period, which is what we're set out to do, not run around on some phantom thing called CRT that everybody gets upset about, but nobody can agree on what it means and what it doesn't mean, except it hurts white children's feelings. It's poisonous. Get it out of here. But to get it out of here, what is it? See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
So we can come up with a whole bunch of CRTs and see which one really everybody can agree on. And I say counter-racist truth or constructive results truth. That can apply to any situation. Constructive results, if you're going to get constructive results, who can be against constructive results?
Yes.
And you can start with the truth, okay?
You can start, yes, exactly.
That's how I kind of bounced that around last week on this show, just in the last few minutes, because everything in counter-racist codification is about getting to the point real fast. fast as you can get there and moving on to the next step, the next step, the next step. We're dragging feet. We've been doing that too long.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yeah. Out of all that you mentioned, there's several that were mentioned to me, and you hit on 5. Just they really gravitated to that. One was the what you just mentioned, counter-racist theory, constructive race theory, counter-racist truth, constructive racist truth, and constructive result truth. I realize that you made those up by you logically thinking, which seems to be in agreement with most of the people that have contacted me, even people around the planet, felt that way and were very inspired, by that. So thank you for the review on that. And so now you have heard this. It may be repeated again in the second hour, but now you've heard it from reviewing from the last hour.
Speaking and I'd like to say something else.
Yes, sir.
Right. Basically, that's what I want people to do with all words, because everything that's going on in solving the race problem, basically, starting with, is about how you use words. So I want people to take command, the victims of white supremacy, not to wait for somebody else to come up with some terms, but just like in the hip-hop industry and whatnot, and when people start singing what they call hip-hop, everybody was asking, what's hip-hop? What's the difference between hip-hop and rap? Well, the people who invented the terms had the answers to that. See, so black people can do that with the whole race issue. You make up your own terms. You don't have to wait on anybody. Just like I was doing that off the top of my head right in the end of the program last week.
Yes.
And that was just coming to me as I went along, because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to invent words, because when you invent words, everybody has to ask you, what do the words mean? That's what you want, commands of language. So you don't have to wait around for somebody to come up with something and you walk around scratching your head all day trying to figure out what they mean. Let them figure out what you mean. And you'll tell them, all right, with the correct intentions.
With the correct intentions, yes. Like I said, your words and your thoughts, you're dealing with the counter-racist theory, it just was an overwhelming response to that, and I just thought I would bring it up and have you mention it at the beginning of the hour here. Let's go to Buffalo, where Monica is at. Monica, let me see if I can buffer you in here or whatever it is. Okay, Monica, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
This is Marquise. I got the unmuted from the call.
Oh, well, it says Monica on my screen, but since you're on here, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning.
Let me get right to it then. Over the weekend, or I think 2 days before, a white female sex model stabbed her black male boyfriend in the shoulder, where he unfortunately succumbed to his injuries. Mr. Fuller, once again, can you explain why the code bars sexual relationships between black males and white females during the system of white supremacy?
All right, thank you.
Because it puts black people at a greater disadvantage. Why? Because it causes confusion. First of all, in the black person's mind. See, I was trained from elementary school and probably prior to that, just to worship white people in general. And I'm talking about going to school now, because there was no black people's pictures in none of the books that I had when I was going to school. That's something that came after the night in full force, starting with the 1960s. But I was going to elementary school in the 1930s. So it was no black people. Just page after page. Julius Caesar was white. King of England was white. All the kings that were worth anything were all white. They didn't even mention any kings in Africa or nothing like that. it talked like Africa didn't even exist. And when they showed that some Africans did exist, they were just some people dancing around a fire, worshiping fire, and chasing each other with spears and eating the corpses. And that's all we learned about Africa. That's all Africans did. Stab each other with a spear and put the dead body in a big pot and boil it and then take it out and eat it. And when they weren't doing that, and while they were boiling the remains of somebody they had killed there in another tribe, they danced around the fire. Now, that's all we learned about Africa. And all the cartoons was about that, showing a bunch of black people dancing around a fire, because fire was something like, it was like the sun. So they say it's the closest thing to the sun, so we worship the sun, so we'll worship fire. And particularly when it's boiling our food, which is the other tribe. And that's all that they do. They don't do nothing else. And so you just stay away from them because they're not about nothing else. But when I turn to the pages about white people, great ships, great conquerors, always that, great conquerors, but great explorers, and great this and great that. And last but not least, in answer to the question, the great white queen. Now, if you're black and you can just touch the skin of a white woman and you're a black male, you have died and gone to heaven 50 trillion times. Now, that was ingrained in my brain. That's what they literally taught in black schools without even knowing that was what they were teaching. But with no black people in the textbooks, what else are we going to think? Goldilocks, Little Red Riding Hood, Snow White, right in your face. Like that old saying about the black person standing in front of the mirror, the witch in Snow White stood in front of the mirror or somebody and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" All right, asking the mirror, because the mirror had wisdom in it. It would talk back to you and answer your questions. And then they had that old joke. Somebody always came up with a joke about black people, because black people are a joke in the system of white supremacy. Every black person is nothing but a joke. All right? So the black person standing in front of the mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" And the mirror talked back and said, "Snow White, you black son of a bitch, and don't you ever forget it."
Wow.
Now, I heard that one when I was in elementary school. In
elementary school. Okay. Speaking about thank you. It said, now they got it together here. Okay, Marquis, thank you. Speaking about those books, Mr. Fuller, that you had, one of the things that most of us, I'll put it like this, most of us have been told or led to believe, which is in the history books that we were given to read, is that Jackie Robinson was the first to integrate Major League Baseball and pumped it up. But a few of us on further research found out that is not true. A man by the name of Moses Fleetwood Walker was the first black person to play Major League Baseball back in 1884. And him and his brother Weldy, and even before that, there was a guy. His last name, I think it was William White, but he passed for White, but he was before even that. Do you know, or have you heard that, or do you know anything about that before we move on?
I've heard something about that.
Okay.
But see that last thing you just said. Moving on. That's one thing we need to do here in the year 2022, in April. We need to move on from the standard we used to have. the white supremacists have us chasing down everything in history that we can find and try to say, hey, I found something else here where a black person did this. And then 15, 20, 30 years later, hey, I found something else over here. There was a black person involved in this and whatnot. And we found two of them that were great geniuses in such and such a year, back before the time of Jesus and whatnot. And see, everybody, here, look, we found three more, and they got black people been doing that like forever, going back to when I was in elementary school. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying, let's stop that altogether.
Yes.
And we stop trying to prove anything that we ever did. Stop trying to prove it. I mean, just say, hey, I'm me. I'm here. And they'll say, well, what have you done, black person? I haven't done nothing. But I'm not going to be mistreated. I'm not dipping in this thing no more of trying to chase down some black hero that lived 1,500 years ago or even 15 years ago, and then run up and say, see, some more of our people did something that made sense. And no. See, they got us on that thing, and we've been doing it like forever. And I'm saying here in April of 2022, we need to stop that right now.
Okay.
And say, look, even if I had never accomplished nothing, I just got here yesterday, so what?
Okay.
They say, well, you have accomplished something in order for us to, to treat you like a person ought to be treated. No. That's your standard, white supremacists.
Mm-hmm.
That's the standard you set. I don't have to do anything to prove that I'm supposed to be here on this planet, breathing the air and being treated like I have been here and invented everything. That's how I'm supposed to be treated, as a person. All right?
Yes, sir. The conclusion of the meeting resulted in the last term, which was moving on, understanding the counter-racist theory, because a lot of the history may not be what we thought it would be, and then we realized at the end that what do you expect being a prisoner of war? This is what the warden has done or said, and that's the way it is. So when you discover it, then you just discovered it. Let's do this. Let's take a station break here. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. here on and heard on blogtalkradio.com. You can also get the show at producejustice.com, which also you can get the books that Mr. Fuller will be talking about and all the use of terms that will be used on this program and any other program that you've heard at the producejustice.com website. We'd like for your participation to call into the program, and you can by dialing or whatever that you do now, 516-453-9921. Make sure you give your name to the call screener so that I can properly identify you. Sorry about that, Marcus. They said Monica on there, but Marcus, we got that straight. Sorry about that. But give the call screener your name, and we can go on from there. And please be brief. It was also mentioned among the chatters. And speaking about chatters, if you'd like to join the chatters, you can by going to blogtalkradio.com. You want to click on programs and then the Produce Justice Show. And then once you get that, there's a little place where you push the button, and you can get into the chat room and join the chat as KJJNI3577 did. Thank you. Kurt Chris is in 16 is in there too. You can do that. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY @gmail.com, and you'll be glad you did. All righty. Thank you again, Marcus. And let's go to Houston. John, you're on. Wait a minute. See if I can get you in here. Yeah, there you go. John, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question for today?
Grand Rising, gentlemen. And thank you, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller.
John, you sound muffled, sir. You sound muffled.
I guess my VGQ this morning is in response to critical race theory, or what CRT may be considered with why they are crying racial tears, in response to Mr. Fuller this morning. When you look at, are either of you gentlemen familiar with white cargo, or and they were white and they were slaves? So in reference to Assembly Bill 3121 and the attempt at the Reparations Task Force in California, when we find ourselves, the fact of the word slave origin is from the word Slav. And when white cargo and they were white and they were slaves, proves to us some things that people don't know, that Barack Hussein Obama's slave history comes through his white mother and the alleged first slave that went to court in the United States criminal justice system. If neither of you gentlemen were familiar with that, where do you think that leaves us in our perplexed position of reparations if we continue to consider ourselves descendants of slaves? And thank you again, Mr. Bobby, and have a wonderful morning. I have a hold to hear his response.
Okay. This is what I'm going to say, John. I couldn't hear you because I indicated that you were muffled. I don't know if Mr. Fuller heard all of that. No one could really understand you. Even some of the chatters have said that they couldn't understand or hear what you had to say. So maybe there's something matter with the phone. I don't know. If you can, get that fixed, and you can call back and repeat what you said, because I didn't hear. Did you hear all of it, Mr. Fuller?
Well, I heard some of it with an understanding that it has to do with reparations. But I think I've talked about reparations on several programs. But I'm saying that reparations, in my opinion, everybody can step up to the plate. I've told this to people, just in what you might call off the radio, the podcast, conversations. People have asked me about reparations all down through the years since people first started talking about it. And I concluded that the best way to do it under the United Independent Compensatory Code system, which is what I say we should have our own way of doing things, and this is just my suggestion. Under the compensatory logic, it's United Independent, meaning each individual black person should say what their reparations should be. This is not no one-size-fits-all type thing, because every black person's circumstances have been different. The white supremacists are correct about that, but they have the incorrect intentions of how to handle it, okay, the way it's been done so far. They're saying that, hey, we're going to have some type of payday or something like that. No. Each and every black person steps up to the window and say, how you repaired that person that just went away from this window. That's between you and him, or you and her, whomever that might be. So if they're satisfied with the repairs that they got, now I got a new set of repairs for me, that's tailored for me, because I am an individual person. You white people are always saying, we're not communists. You just can't broad brush everybody and put them in the same category. We're all individuals. We like individual liberties and all like that. Okay, well, I'm coming to the table with this reparations thing, and I am an individual. I have individual cares and woes. So when I come to the table, hey, you can't give me the same format that you gave the other black person that just left the table, or the one that you were planning on giving the next one that steps up to the table with some type of plan that somebody else made. I wasn't in on that plan. I'm an individual. Now, a lot of black people will say, oh, we never will get nothing done like that. Well, that's the way it's got to be done. We're in this individual negotiations. You can have a broad structure for setting it up, but it's got to be set up for every eventuality you can name. For each individual, you can have, because most of it you will run out of different options, because there's only so many things that can be done. But to the extent that you can, the way they're going about doing it now, Talking about one size fits all? No.
No.
That black people, that's completely unacceptable. No, I step up to the table. I say, I got a serious housing problem. All right. They say, oh, well, you know, and do you have any other problems? Yeah, I got a list here. I got my list.
Yeah.
The person that just came before me and the person coming after me, even though that's my cousin, standing right behind me, he's got his own list, and I got mine about what will repair me. This is about me. All right. Practice what you preach, white supremacists. Okay, individuality, all right, talking about being capitalist. Okay, where's the capital? Individual capital. I'm not any kind of collective capital. I got individual woes. I got special problems my cousin doesn't even have, I guess, unless he tells you he got the same ones. But he's behind me. He's in line. He'll be next. But I'm here now, through the window. I want my reparations, and I pick up what I want, and we'll negotiate that. Now I step away, then he'll step up to the table, tell you what somebody owes him. Okay? All right. So, I mean, well, that gets real cumbersome. Hey, racism has been cumbersome.
It sure
we got
has.
to set some standards of our own.
Mm-hmm.
That's what compensatory counter-racist, CRT, is all about. Counter-racist truth. Constructive results.
Constructive
for everybody.
Results. Yes, sir. All righty. Let's go to Milwaukee. Corey, get ready. Let me see if I can do this properly. Okay, Corey, we got you. Go ahead with Mr. Fuller.
Greetings, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Fuller.
Greetings, sir.
My question is could it possibly be nervousness, or is it a refinement of racism when a white person amongst other white people and black and non-white people makes fun of him or herself for saying, oh, I'm dressed like a white person, or this or that, this self-depreciating jokes about a white person, about her himself, in the presence of us non-white people? What is this that we're seeing? Is this...
that question again is what?
When a white person is making fun of her or himself in terms of, for example, saying, oh, I'm dressed like a white person, or, you know, making jokes about themselves in front to black people, what is this that we're seeing when they do this?
Well, if the white person is a white supremacist, white supremacists don't do anything that's not going to give strength to the system of white supremacy. That's why we have white supremacy. See, they are very well focused. Black people are not focused on anything much of all. I mean, it's whatever comes down the pike, because we're trained that way. The white supremacists are always thinking, is this going to help me become stronger and going to help that black person become weaker? Otherwise, I have no interest in it at all. See, that's the white supremacist philosophy, and they have been successful. The most successful enterprise based on this logic it would be. They were very well focused. Black people just focus on whatever they have coming down the road. You know, what do you got out there, you know? What is everybody else doing? I'm going over there and see if I can get in a piece of that action, too. When we don't have any focus of our own, any plans of our own. All of our plans are made by the white supremacists, and so we just fall in suit. Now, it's not a criticism in the traditional way, but it's an observation of the truth. And what else would we be as prisoners of war, born in the system of white supremacy? We don't know anything else except what they tell us. You know, how to be gangsters and all like that, so that's the thing to be. So I'll grow up and be a gangster, you know, and look around and see who's applauding me for being one. And that's why we have all the killing among black people. So that broad answer to the question is we catch all our cues from them. And that's what we have to stop doing. We have to come up with, what are we here for? What are black people invented for by the Creator? Now, Gandhi said, when he was asked by Nehru, I read this somewhere many years ago, either in Ebony magazine or in a book called Conversations with Nehru. It was about Mohandas Gandhi, interviews. And Gandhi was asked by Nehru, reportedly, what do you think the purpose of the Negro is? And Gandhi thought for a minute, and he said, I think the purpose of the Negro is to bring peace to the world. And that hit me like a thunderbolt. I said, that's Gandhi said that? and I'm looking at black people. I'm saying, black people and peace? You're going to find peace with black people? What black people are you talking about? I don't see nothing peaceful about black people. Black people are always talking about fighting, arguing, loudest thing, voice in the house, ready to do battle at any time, about nothing, okay, or about everything at all, completely crazy. And Gandhi is saying, we are the people that's going to bring peace to the world, and I think that he's correct over the years. The people who are the most messed up people will turn out to be the people who are the least messed up because they know what being messed up is better than anybody.
Since you brought his name up, are you or were you aware that there are some that indicate that Mahatma Gandhi was a strong anti-black racist?
Sure, I've heard that.
Okay.
So are black people in general.
Not this meek, humble humanitarian. Thank you, Justice Warrior.
No, see, yes, and Gandhi would be. What else would he be? I mean, growing up in a place where you got people who are called untouchables, and the so-called untouchables, most of them have dark skins, so I've been told, and if an untouchable touches a cup, in other words, that's that class of people in India called untouchables, where even today, I mean, they kind of gloss over that, but they say it still goes on wholesale, okay? You got a category of people called the caste system, most of them dark-skinned, and they're the ones that empty all the toilets, the public toilets and all like that. And they are called untouchables, meaning whatever they touch, you are not supposed to touch it if you have any kind of dignity or self-respect at all. If you're a Hindu in India or Muslim in India. Now, that's what I've heard. Now, people can straighten me out on that who have traveled all over India and all like that. But I've heard that here in the year 2022, not to say this about when Gandhi came along, it was just, everybody understood that. Gandhi spoke out against it, so I understand. And it was shown in the movie Gandhi, where he talked about untouchability. But the crowd didn't applaud him when he said that, because they say, hey, we've always had untouchables and we're going to have them forever. I mean, you know, otherwise, I mean, hey, we got to have that category of people that you stomp on just like the British. You know, just like the British stomp on all of us. I mean, that somebody got to get stomped on. See, that's been the tradition handed down through all over the entire world. And the system called white supremacy, that's just a late comer to the way everything was looked at in every society.
Yes,
all
sir.
right? So nobody can look at their history and start bragging about it. That's another thing that comes out of counter-racist science, counter-racist logic. When we start talking about history and whose history is the better than the other person's history. Ain't nobody's history that's on this planet ever been nowhere near what it ought to be.
Yes,
nobody. And let's get that point across right now. Nobody's history has been anywhere close to what history for people on this planet should have been right out of the gate from the first person that showed up.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that even is proven by even Bible scholars. What do they say? Every preacher says that every Sunday. Say, hey, we're all born in what? Sin. We're born in sin. And what do you mean by sin? People who are in complete disorder. All out of order. Ain't nothing righteous about it. About us who? Everybody that ever was. How about that? Everybody who ever was nowhere near the type of person that a person ought to be. Nobody. Starting with Adam and Eve, if you want to start with them. Why? Because they got charmed by the snake. Every preacher says that. And then there was two people that came after them, Cain and Abel, and they were brothers. And what did one of them do to the other? Killed him. They've been doing that ever since. And we're still doing it all over the hood and all over the world. And white people are doing it in the Ukraine right now and thinking nothing of it. Killing.
Yes, sir.
So we need to stop bragging about history, period. Excuse me for shouting, but I mean,
that's okay.
April 2022, we need to latch on to truth and stop playing games with it and straighten this mess out once and for all.
Once
Become
and for all.
the quality of people that we all ought to be.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Corey. Let's go up to Minneapolis. And the Black Mermaid. Get ready, Black Mermaid. Let me cue you in here. Okay, here we go. The Black Mermaid, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Bobby, and good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yes,
good morning.
I have a VGQ this morning. My VGQ is Mr. Fuller and the listening audience. Please watch the Unnatural Causes episode called When the Bow Breaks. This episode shows that black women with college degrees and access to resources are still more likely to give birth to premature babies than white women who haven't even finished high school. Those premature black babies are not born kicking and with energy. The chronic stress of racism can be embedded in the body, taking a heavy toll on black families and on children, even before they leave the womb. This documentary shows that health does not always start and stop at the individual level. I feel like sometimes we only think about health on the individual level and not look at health on the community and systems level. The white supremacists create environments, systems, and policies that negatively affect black people's health. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you to Black Mermaid, VGQ. Thank you. Don't be a stranger. Okay. Let's see here. Let me do this one. This is from Rachel, Mr. Fuller. Says this, Mr. Fuller, first of all, good morning. And what is the best way to deal with a victim dying?
A victim of white supremacy dying?
She just said, what do you do with a victim dying? That was all.
Well, we're born to die. You make preparations for the death. And the victim, the person, whomever that person is, who is dying, should understand that it's all a gift. You come into this world unannounced, even to yourself. Somebody had to tell you you were here. That's what they had to tell me. I came. I showed up. I didn't know anything about how I showed up. But somebody said, hey, wake up there, little fella. You're here. All right. And you're screaming and yelling. You need help. That goes with the territory of being here and not knowing where you are or what to do. So somebody's got to do all the thinking for you. And then later on, you can do some thinking for yourself, and you try to help the next person who comes along. Because you're already doing some thinking, and their thinking hasn't started yet. So we all come into this world unannounced. And it's a free ride. Like I had to tell a white person once who he was criticizing black people for being beggars, basically, saying, Fuller, there's no such thing, as you getting a free lunch. And so black people need to come all that stuff about somebody owes them something and all like that. And so I told them, hey, you got a free lunch. And he says, well, you don't know that much about me. Or what are you talking about? I said, for 9 months, you got a free ride. You wasn't hitting a lick at a snake. Somebody was carrying you. If things went according to normal, according to average. Somebody carried you for 9 months, and you didn't do nothing but sleep and eat. And if you don't get anything else after that, if you never get one day of peace or a decent meal after that, you got 9 months right from the beginning. So somebody helped you do something or you wouldn't even be here. Now, I know that because I see the evidence of it. And he had to agree, okay? So I'm saying that to the whole audience. If you don't get nothing else, you got 9 months when you wasn't doing nothing. And at one time, you weren't even here, wasn't even thought about being here. Because the people that put you here hadn't even met, okay? So in answer to the question, when you spend a little time here, and you do this, and you do that, and you do the other, and then it comes to the point where that time runs out, because you wear out, you got no complaints, really.
Mm-hmm.
Because you didn't have nothing before you were here. It's all a gift. So the main thing to remember is while you are here, try to do something that produces constructive results.
Okay. All righty. Let's see here. Let's go here. This is from King Negro. Says this: Charles W. Mills, a critical race theory scholar who died last year, said, by the way, this is also for Be Good One and SWA, said this, that white supremacy started in the 17th century during the, quote, Enlightenment period, which also is when the transatlantic slave trade began. He says that in ancient times, slavery was not based on skin color. That prior to the, quote, Enlightenment period, end of quote, Europe distinguished itself from outsiders based on religion because of the Catholic Church. But when the, quote, Enlightenment, end of quote, era arrived, race replaced religion, and Europe began discriminating against outsiders on the basis of race. Charles W. Mills talked about that on page 23 of his book, The Racial Contact. Have you ever heard of that book or that gentleman, Mr. Fuller?
No, I haven't heard of him or the book, but I have heard that story in all kinds of different forms, particularly when it comes to the time frame. Some people will say racism started 400 years ago, all right, roughly. And there are other people who say no, add a couple of more 100 years to that. It's 600 years. And then there are other people who say, you don't even know what you're talking about. And I've heard this for years. None of you know what you're talking about that 400 years and that 600 years. It's 2,000 years. It's when white supremacy again. And there are a lot of people who say that. And then there are some other people who say, hey, it's 6,000, folks. Wake up. It's been 6,000 years since the white supremacists took over all of the non-white people of this planet. 6,000 years. That's when it was. And then there are other scholars, many of them black, who say, hey, it goes back much further than that. So when people ask me, well, what is the real gospel? What is it? When did racism really start? Give me the date and time and the persons, the committee or whatever it was, name some names, name where they were, what their titles were, who started this thing called racism. And I give, listening to everybody else, since I wasn't here, I say, I don't know. And then I add the codified response, and there ain't no reason why I should care. I just know what I'm supposed to do about it.
All righty. This is what we're going to do here. I was just told how many people we have online. So we're going to get ready to close out the first hour. But, Mr. Fuller, before we close out the first hour, we have exactly 2 minutes before we do that. I'm going to give you the 2 minutes. I'm going to close the first hour, then open up the second hour, and we're going to go straight through. 2 minutes for you, Mr. Fuller.
I just want since we started out with that CRT thing, I just want people to know, not only with CRT, there'll be some more type of words or whatever, combinations of slangs or whatever that'll be coming down the pike. You just take it and turn it into something that you can use to produce constructive results, whatever it is. Because there'll be more of it. There'll be more CRTs. I mean, next year by this time it might be R742. And everybody will be running around trying to figure out what it means and all like that. So you just come up, oh, R742? That's the latest thing? Okay. I'll make up some R742s and make it work for me. Just whatever works. Constructive results. I don't care how you frame it. I just know what I want done and what I don't want done. And I know the things that I don't want to happen to me that's going to hinder me.
Yes, sir.
Right. And so that it's just all a matter of whatever you want to go with. And regardless of what other people come up with, you know what you need to be doing. And
lastly, before I shut it down for the first hour, people want to know about your recommendations for the booster shot.
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I have to think about it.
All righty, there you go.
The compensatory code says thought, then speech, then action.
Thought, speech, and action.
And I have not made a decision on that yet. I hear a lot of rumors about it. See, so you don't know who's telling the truth about anything. All right, in the system of white supremacy. So you just feel your way.
I'm in the same boat. I had the discussion last evening. I'm in the same boat about that. Okay. This is what we're going to do. We're going to shut this bad boy down the first hour, so thank you for the pleasure of your time for the first hour. That wasn't my statement, though, but I like that. And we thank you for listening. Thank you for all your calls, your comments. Thank you for being brief. Really appreciate that. So we're going to close down the first hour. We're going to open up on the second hour. If you have to go, all right, we'll see you next week. Those of you who are hanging online, guess what? We're going to try to get all of you in. Yes, we are. We're going to try to get all of you in, so we're going to go stay through. Don't forget to get the books at ProduceJustice.com. You've been listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. The second hour will commence in 10 seconds. All righty, welcome back to the second hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show. Just a few seconds early before 10 a.m. in the eastern part of this concept called You Know What. How about the corporation? Thank you, and welcome to the second hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. You know the drill. Get in contact with the show. Give your name to the call screener by calling this number, 516-453-9921. You know what to do. Press number 1 button. You'll get in line. Okay, you got that. You know my Gmail address, the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY @gmail.com. You know that one. And, of course, you know the chatters. Go to blogtalkradio.com. You want to click on the programs, go to the Produce Justice Show, hit the chat room, and you are in with all those wonderful people in the chat room. And you can get information about what's been happening from the show, from Constructive Action Items. Gives you a detail of what we talked about last week and all that good stuff. Okay, we're going to try to get all the calls in, so let's go. Now, I'm going to call your name out. Hopefully I got it right. In Tennessee, Terrence, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Hey, good morning. I'm not going to ask how Mr. Fuller's doing today because he's on one today. So instead of still learning, he's like, y'all going to learn today. But good morning.
Okay. Good morning.
But good morning to both of you. So my CRT is Cure Reality Tampering, or Conquer Reality Tempering.
Okay.
Tempering.
Cure reality tampering. That sounds like a winner.
Okay. Good.
All right.
Okay. So what I wanted to say is that I've had a lot of, I'm not going to call them mentors, I don't like that word, but I've had a lot of older advisors, like I consider you, Mr. Fuller, have been passing in the last couple of weeks. I've lost maybe 4 or 5. And what I've realized as I'm helping the families and participating is a lot of knowledge is gone when we lose our elders. But also, a lot of our elders have allowed their children or enabled their children and made them what I consider delusional. And so as their families pass, they're stuck. They've had these ways. They haven't been looking at reality. They've been, I guess, in a delusional state, and now this reality is hitting them, and they're lost. So, Mr. Fuller, can you talk about being delusional and how, even myself, I'm trying to see where in my life am I delusional?
Well, depending on what you mean by delusional, and by delusion, to the best of my understanding, it's getting away from reality. Having, say, delusion, having illusions, ill, I-L-L, that's a sickness. And so what dispels all of that, is finding out what the truth is about everything. I mean, that, and truth is what? That which is. Find out what the reality of everything really is. Look at everything and see what it really is, not what you're told that it is, okay? Because under the system of white supremacy, they believe in lots of illusion, not delusion, and they definitely believe in confusion, okay? So that's what all of it adds up to. So when people are delusionary, what they call that, and having to go to a psychiatrist and all that, that comes from not seeing everything the way that it really is. See, once you see things the way they really, other than what you are being told, because you're being told all kinds of stuff, that's what causes the confusion. But there's that elementary school tale about the king with no clothes, and the little shepherd boy who hadn't been told about the king didn't have on any clothes when everybody had been told that the king was going to be dressed in his finest. But the king didn't have on any clothes at all when he came out. And everybody who had been told that the king would be dressed in his finest, they were going by what they had been told rather than going by what they were looking at. But the little boy that came down out of the hills, he hadn't gotten a story about the king was going to be dressed in his finest today. So if I remember the story correctly, the little boy said Look at the king. Look at the king. The king is in there altogether. The king is in there altogether. And then everybody else could then see it. Because the little shepherd boy, you know, he hadn't heard the lie. He just went by what he saw. And that's what black people have to do. Go by what you see right there in front of you, not what somebody keeps whispering in your ear. That's where the delusion comes from. Because what you're seeing doesn't add up to what you're being told. We got to get in the habit of thinking like that. And wait a minute. Every black person should say that. Even when you don't know why you're saying, wait a minute. See, even when Fuller talks, say, wait a minute, Fuller. I don't believe nothing that you're saying. See, you should go into every situation like that. You don't believe nothing that nobody's saying. Show me. Show me what you're talking about. And show me in such a way that I find to figure out what you're talking about and do it in a hurry because you're wasting my time otherwise. Now, every black person on the planet should have that attitude right now. Get it right now. I don't believe nobody about nothing. Show me. Show me. All right.
All righty. Terrence from Tennessee, thank you very much for your call. Let's go down to Texas. We're trying to get through these. Delbert, we finally got to you. Go ahead, Delbert.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr.
Good morning, sir.
It's confusing when Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, refers to other white people as Nazis. Mr. Fuller, can you expand upon your idea of white organized crime family? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Well, I don't know what Mr. Putin means, but I go by the code. That's why I say we need a code. What does the code say about what Mr. Putin or anybody else says? You ask them, what do they mean? What Mr. Putin? If I was sitting and talking to him right now, if he was on the phone right now, and he called in on this program, you know,
which he can.
I would ask him. I would ask him. Yeah, I would say, Mr. Putin, what do you mean by Nazis? What's a Nazi? What do you mean? And he might tell me to look in the dictionary. Whatever he tells me, that's what I would do. I say, what dictionary? You know. And if he told me, I'd look, and then I'd say, well, that's what you mean when you say Nazi. It's what's in this dictionary. And he'll say, whatever he says. And I say, oh, now I know what you mean. Because I might have thought it meant something else. We always ask people what they mean when they're talking, and particularly Neely Fuller. Because I don't want to get lost either. See, I might get all caught up in myself. And I'm not making no kind of sense at all. So the best way to do that is help Neely Fuller to get back on the making sense track. Because I'm not supposed to be off that track at all. See, truth don't have no regard for Neely Fuller or nobody else. When you start getting into falsehood, even when you mean well, meaning well don't mean nothing. You know, you got to show me the constructive result. I don't know what anybody means. And that should be black people's attitude. Now, that's the first question. Now, the second question, I lost track of that.
I think he hung up. I think he did, but I know you messed up a lot of people.
That's why I like to answer one question at a time.
That's okay.
Because I kind of see that may be a flaw in the whole code system, but I say never move to the second question until the first question is answered, because I've found from experience that works best. Works best in what way? It avoids confusion.
I guess that answers the question.
It's just a process for avoiding confusion. Don't get the first question all mixed up with the second question, because it might not be. They might be interrelated, but then they might not be. But somewhere along the line, they probably are interrelated some kind of way, but not at this particular point. See, communications is kind of difficult to do in such a way that you get the most constructive result. But then basically, it's not difficult if you codify it. It becomes simple. And one of the simple laws, according to the code, never move to the second question until the first question is answered correctly.
Correctly. Yes, sir. Okay. Okay, let's go to Stephen in East Texas. Stephen, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. It probably remember my name better I go by the name of Pufferman Cop. But in any case, Mr. Neely Fuller, I appreciate y'all time. It's just always an honor to be able to talk to you and a blessing to see you still hear your voice. But as it relates to the code and white supremacy, you mentioned about that you can't suspect a white person to be a racist, or you can't accuse a white person of being a racist. So, but the important thing about crime in and of itself, because that's the area where I always focus in, crime doesn't have a race. So with that being said, can we identify or suspect a person to be a criminal? I suggest that you can, because in my background, all I can say is I'm dealing with criminals for so many years, made me Officer of the Year and so many other things. I've been able to determine a lot of mechanisms in place to determine whether or not a person is going to commit a crime against you in order to save your life, protect you and your family. Now, with that being said, Mr. Fuller, I have a question. And that question to you is, do you believe, or Mr. Bobby, anyone listening, can you identify a person is going to commit a crime regardless of their race? If so, why or why not?
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, depending on what crime you're talking about, you can do that. You should always be suspicious of any white person for being a criminal, being a racist. Racism is a crime, the biggest crime you can commit by the people on this planet, according to counter-racist science, counter-racist logic, according to the compensatory counter-racist code. If a white person is practicing racism, that's the greatest crime that a person can commit out of all the crimes put together on planet Earth here in April of 2022. That's code. And you should always suspect any white person who is able to be a racist. That word able, underline it, has to be able to be a racist, of actually being a racist. Why? Where's the logic? We're talking about suspicions now. You're not saying, you never say that the person is a racist, because you don't know. But you can tell any white person, if they ask you, well, do you suspect I could be a racist? And you say, oh, yes, I do suspect that you are one. Why? Because I have no reason to believe you're not in a system of white supremacy. I don't have a list of everybody who's a racist. I've said this many, 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 many times. This is rock-solid code. Every white person who is able to be a racist, if you're a victim of racism in April of 2022, anywhere on this planet, and you're a person of color, you have a duty to suspect every white person of being a racist if that white person is able to be one. So when you mean by able, you mean they have to know what? Able to do what? Able to know one color from another. That's what. You can't be a racist if you can't tell one color from another. If you can't tell white from black. If you can't tell red from yellow. You have to know colors to be a racist. So a white person who is newly born you do not suspect that white person of being a racist. Might be, but you just ordinarily, there's no way that they can function as a racist, because even if a white person at birth is a racist, which I don't see how that could be, because a newborn baby, I don't think, can tell one color from another. Or, it might be a lamp that's orange, or it might be the ceiling of the hospital that is green. But the baby doesn't know this. Mm-hmm. Also, a white person who is up in age and who was the head of the Ku Klux Klan at one time, if they stay here long enough, just keep getting up in the morning, going to bed at night, they will get to the place where, even though they had been a racist, that same white person who used to be the head of the Ku Klux Klan is not going to be a racist anymore. Why? Because they'll get to the place they can't tell a spoon from a fork. That's going to happen to everybody. All you got to do is just stay here long enough. And they definitely won't tell one color from another. In fact, the head of the Ku Klux Klan will wind up maybe in some nursing home with a black lady, having the hold up his head so that she can put the spoonful of food in his mouth. The head of the Ku Klux Klan. All he got to do is just keep breathing. He'll get there. And he's running here talking about black people are inferior and all like that. Well, that inferior black lady, all right, with her 6 children, the home that needs somebody to feed them, will be sitting there with her uniform on, feeding the head of the Ku Klux Klan, who was walking around saying the N-word 24/7 all of his days. But if he stayed here long enough, all right, and a lot of them do, that's where he'll finally wind up, with that minimum wage black lady feeding him with a tube and telling him, now, Mr. Douglas, you're going to have to act right now. Hold your head up. Scolding it.
All
like
right.
they do in nursing homes. Everybody knows I'm telling the truth.
For sure. Thank you, Stephen, from East Texas. Let's go to Ray. Ray in Dallas. Okay, Ray, go ahead with Mr. Fuller.
Yes, I have a concise VGQ and question. Mr. Fuller and Terrence from Tennessee helped me with 3 CRTs this morning. Number 1, cumbersome reality training, compensatory resistance training, compensatory rebellion tactics. Now, my question, Mr. Fuller, is there any reason to suspect that the system of white supremacy cannot be countered using any language available to any non-white person on prison earth at this time?
Is there any reason that the system of white supremacy cannot be challenged?
Cannot be countered using any language available to any non-white person on prison earth at this time? Yes.
You use language to challenge the system of white supremacy in whatever language you speak. You can use any language. Language is nothing but a tool. And people invent tools all the time. I was looking at television last night, and I think the location was New Mexico. And they were showing how people who work in salt factories, places where they process salt, they dig it up out of the ground or come to the seashore or whatnot, and you got machines, and they showed the different types of machines. And people had to invent machines, and then after they invented the machines, the people who maintained those machines that were invented, they were showing how they were improvised. They came up with ideas about, well, what if this thing jams, which machines sometimes got jammed with salt. So the people who were working with it, they fashioned new tools. So the point that I'm making is you can invent words just like you just did with the CRT. And like I was illustrating last week. Hey, you come up with whatever tool you need. I mean, that somebody didn't think of. Anything that works to produce what? A constructive result. All right?
Okay.
Yeah, if the result is constructive, it meant that whatever you fashioned to produce the constructive result was constructive. It wasn't destructive. And that's what black people should be about. And we can use any language, any tool, anything that comes up. Just step forward. I mean, like I started the program talking about inferiority. I talked about it on the last program, couple of programs before. And I just want to hit on that now. We can wrap that up here in April. We don't need to even talk about inferiority no more. Why? Because we decide that inferiority, everybody's inferior. And that's the truth. So you can't say nothing that's not true. That's against the code outright. The white supremacists say a whole bunch of things that are not true because that's what keeps white supremacy going. They feed off of lies of every type that you can name. So the antidote to a lie is the truth. Okay? So you can tell the truth about yourself. If anybody asks me, Neely Fuller, am I inferior? We're not going to have no seminar set up to talk about that and all this genetic stuff forever. That's just a long conversation. When you can slam dunk it, that's what codification is all about, coming to the point real fast and never having to come to another point again, because that is the point. Yeah, Neely Fuller is inferior. So the question is, what do you do with an inferior person? You practice justice. Guarantee that Neely Fuller is not mistreated with his inferior self, and guarantee that he gets the most constructive help with his inferior self. Babies are inferior. That's how I wrapped it up the first time I started talking about inferiority in a codified manner.
Yes, sir.
Because people bounce that around all the time. Well, we can wrap that up in just one sentence. Everybody is inferior.
Everybody is inferior.
Yeah, because nobody is practicing justice. So the standard is you are inferior if you do not practice justice, period. I don't care who you are. And under the system of white supremacy, nobody can practice justice, so everybody is inferior.
Okay. Thank you, Ray from Dallas. Justice Warrior said this, Mr. Fuller, when you were speaking about somebody was identifying a racist or not. Justice Warrior said this, Mr. Fuller, little of that, what you said, makes any sense now unless the white supremacist went senile. If not, he'll still recognize color of skin and sound of voice. All righty. DGQ. Darnell, New York. We got you. You're in with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
Mr. Fuller, my question today is, according to the code, why is persistence the one thing a victim of the system of white supremacy could look forward to when nothing else pays off?
Because of logic. When you look at everything that was ever done, the people who did it were persistent, regardless of what anybody said. They just went ahead and say, this is the way I'm going to go, because I have decided this is the way I'm going to go, because I think that it will work in doing what I want to see done. And everybody who has been persistent, every invention was made by a person. That invention came about. Every song that was ever written, the person just persisted. When you see people receiving awards and whatnot, they'll say that, hey, it looks like I did this overnight. I didn't do this overnight. I persisted. A lot of people told me that I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do the other, and all like that. But I kept on keeping going. I kept on keeping going. That's what persistence is. And every inventor has said that same thing. I just kept on. Everybody said I was crazy. And I agreed with some of them, but I kept going. I said, yeah, I'm crazy, but I'm gonna keep on because I think I'm on to something. Well, everybody say you're crazy now. You know, you're gonna have to live with that, so I'll live with it. All right, and I'll die with it because I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm gonna keep at it. And the next thing you know, the person has come up with some kind of invention. All right, a motor scooter, and all like that, or a bicycle that they say you ain't gonna get that thing to fly. Next thing you know, they got a bicycle flying. So, you know, you never can tell. It's been proven all down through history. They write songs about that type of thing, about everybody saying what everybody says can't be done.
Oh, can't be done. Thank you.
It's an old saying. I just want to inject this. It's an old saying. Be careful about what you say can't be done, because some damn fool will come along and do it.
Okay. Thank you, Darnell from New York. Everybody, you are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And while we're on the subject, hey, listen, you got to get that book. For those of you who are new to the program, you got to get the book. It's called the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, or the Code Book, because that is a long title. And you can get that book by going to ProduceJustice.com. And it is a code to instruct you as only suggestions how to counteract white supremacy. You got to get the book at ProduceJustice.com. That's a website. Go on there, and all that information is on there, and a lot of other stuff, past shows, if you are new to the podcast, so you can get a feel of what's going on. Yeah, you got to get that. Anyway, you're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Fuller, and I'm your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Get in contact with the show because we're trying to get through this. Here's the number, 516-453-9921. Be sure to press the number 1 button. Give your name to the call screener so he or she can punch it up, and I can call your name out, hopefully without butchering it. I've been getting just a teeny bit better, but I need to get better. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com, and you can join the chat room. And I mean, they're having some outstanding conversations in there. Oh, yeah, they most definitely are. You can do that by going to blogtalkradio.com. Then you want to get on where it says, I think it says shows or programs, and then you want to get the Produce Justice show. Hit that bad boy, then hit it again where it says chat, and you are in there, and you might get a smile from Cholo Revolucion. As I did, I think that's a smile. I don't know what that is. But Be Good One is in there, Still Learning Too is in there. JJ, I think from England's in there. Kirk is. 16 is there, Be Good One. Oh, yeah, Justice Warrior. Woo! All that. Get in there and get the talking. Let your finger do the walking, okay? All righty. Here we go. Here we go again. Here we go. Brooklyn at Flatbush, Crown Street, Bed-Stuy, Toussaint. You're on, man.
Mike and Pierre-Paul.
Yay!
Paul, man. Shit, man. You know how that nigga be.
Hey, go ahead, bro.
Shit, man. Fuck, man.
Okay, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead. Okay, well, you're not. Okay, Joy. See, I messed that up. Joy from Minnesota. Joy.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Fuller. Good morning, Mr. Bobby.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yes. My question, before I state my question, I just want to state the rationale for the question first. So given the vast variety that exists among non-whites as far as opinions and perspectives in all areas of life, and for example, even with white supremacy, non-whites tend to differ significantly on whether it even exists or not. Given this difference, this vast difference that exists, does Mr. Fuller really think the system of white supremacy can be dismantled, given this the variety of differences that exist among non-whites?
The question is, there are non-white people who say that white supremacy doesn't exist, and what do you do about that? Is that the question?
No, that is not the question. The question is, because we differ on everything, opinions about everything, including white supremacy, whether it exists or not, given this difference that exists among non-whites across all areas of life, can we really dismantle the system of white supremacy, given the vast majority of differences that exist among us?
Yes. That's why we're having programs like this, and to point that out. See, and it's not going to happen before that happens. Things happen when they happen. So the logic is, it's just a process, but the codified approach is you do the process of elimination of what's important or what isn't. And so how do you find out what is important to the individual person? You ask questions. All problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. And so in the textbook for victims of white supremacy, there are 4 questions that you ask yourself about wants. See, everybody wants something. 24/7, you want something. Even if it's no more than get up from the table and walk into the next room. That's a want. I want to get up from this table and go from the dining room into the living room, or go in through the living room into the kitchen and come back with another plate of food. And that's what I'm going to do. Why? Because that's what I want to do. So you always deal with people or interact with people, first of all, by finding out what that person wants. Because everybody has a want. So when a person doesn't want to talk about whatever it is you were talking about, you talk about what they want to talk about. That's a want. So you just start off when you interact with anybody, white or non-white. What do you want to do? That's the first question. Why do you want to do it? Third question, how do you plan to do this thing that you want to do? Because if they want to do it, they must be having a plan, or they figure they better get one. I mean, you got to have some kind of, even if it's just a plan to go across town, that's a plan. You got to plan how to get there. You're going to ride the bus, or you're going to get your friend to take you, or you're going to get your car at a repair shop, and you're not going across town until that happens. That's a plan. That's the third question. And then that last question, the most important. All 3 of them are important, but that last one, what do you expect the constructive result to be? And that's something that you can ask anybody, anywhere, at any time, because people are always willing to talk about what they want. That's something everybody's willing to do. I mean, there's not a person on this planet that has a want that doesn't want to talk about that want. Everybody will talk about that. They'll brush aside everything to talk about what they want. So that's how you always interact with people, And in answer to your question, that's how the problem of racism will be solved. Because whatever a black person wants to do, it's going to run smack into the race problem anyway. So you don't have to force a person to listen to you talk about race. In fact, the code says you never talk to a person about race unless that person wants to talk about race. Not ever, under any circumstance.
Okay.
You can talk about what they want. It's going to lead to the race issue anyway, because everything does.
Mm-hmm. What they want to talk about. Okay. Joy, Minnesota, thank you so much. Don't be a stranger. Okay, we're going down to Clearwater, Florida, and the last name on the screen says Young. So, Young, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Fuller and Mr. Bobby.
Good morning.
I kind of wanted to piggyback off of one of your previous callers, using the word delusional. And my question is thoughts on the delusion of comfort, the delusion of power, and the delusion of fear pertaining to black and non-white people in the United States of races.
What are my thoughts on delusion? I don't have any particular thoughts on delusion. That's why I guess the person brought it up to me. I don't even have that word in my word guide. I have confusion, and I say that's one thing you get rid of. Now, how do you get rid of confusion? Questions and answers. That's what you do when you go to school. When you go to school, the very fact that you are sitting in the first grade, you are announcing by being there, I am confused. So how do you get rid of confusion? That's why I came here. You got a person up there standing up there called a teacher. That teacher is supposed to be a confusion eliminator. When I walk out of here today, I'm supposed to be less confused than when I walked in. Otherwise, something didn't go correctly in this day that I spent. Because your whole existence on this planet, you're supposed to be in the process of getting rid of confusion each and every moment that you're on this planet. Why? Because when you get rid of confusion, you are doing what automatically? You are solving problems. Every time you get rid of confusion, you're solving a problem. Because the only thing that gets in the way of a problem not being solved is confusion. So how do you get rid of confusion? By understanding. And how do you get understanding? By asking questions of someone who can give you how understanding of what that red light means and what the green light means at the intersection.
Okay.
If you didn't know, somebody told you. So they got rid of confusion. You've been just driving, because nobody ever told you about a lighting system. Say, no, you just don't drive, just any kind of way. Red light, you stop. Yellow light, that's a warning to slow down, to prepare to stop. And then the green one is you go. And somebody had to tell you that. Otherwise, you were what? Confused. And it's that way about big things and little things. You get rid of confusion by asking questions.
Yes, sir.
Black people like to walk around and letting everybody know that they know everything. That's a huge mistake. You walk into every situation saying, I don't know nothing. That's the code procedure. Teach me everything.
Teach me everything. Okay. Thank you. Last name Young, so I'm just going to call you Young as we mosey on here. From the chat room, Still Learning 2 says this: it seems as though Mr. Fuller is saying that a cognitive capacity to discern one's racial character from another must be in place in order to suspect someone of being racist. Be Good said it all comes down to force. Big birds push little birds out of the way to get their food. Then, Still Learning said this. Racist white supremacists use force to dominate non-white people. In the CGI, I think there's computer-generated image movie, Bug's Life, ants realized they outnumbered the grasshoppers and fought back against the system to reclaim their mental health and well-being. They also use force, the force of numbers, and a singular mindset. The ants got on code and displaced the grasshopper from their minds, beliefs, and behaviors. Mr. Fuller, you're always talking about code. By that little synopsis of what happened, could you concur that this is what we must do in order to have a code, to get on code, to stay on code, and replace the system of white supremacy with justice?
I don't know. I never heard that analogy before. But people can think about it. That's what VGQ is for. People voice their opinion about what the best way is, the best approach to solving the race problem. Neely Fuller hasn't solved any race problem. So every voice that steps forward is a voice that should be heard. Somebody might come up with the formula.
Okay, just might. Okay, thank you. Let's go back to Toussaint. Toussaint, I think we got you on here now. Wait a minute. Okay, Toussaint, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So, Mr. Fuller, I've been practicing codification now, and it's led to a lot of good results. But one issue I found when having conversations, when I try to deconstruct things that other victims might say to have a conversation, I get told that I'm taking them too literally. And so I wanted to ask, have you ever had issues or circumstances where you've been told that you were taking someone too literally? And if so, how would you solve that scenario?
Ask a question.
And I would like to stay on the line if possible.
You ask a question. Whatever word the person uses, you say, what do you mean by that? Literally. That I am, what did you say I did? So you get it straight about what the person is saying that needs correcting. That's what they're selling. And that's what it seems that they're telling you. Okay? So you always want to do the correct thing, and you let them know that. So they're correcting you. And so anybody who is correcting you, you shouldn't push back on that, but you want to understand what they are saying. Oh, what I'm doing is not correct. And you are making a suggestion that I need to be doing whatever it is you're saying I should be doing, literally or whatever, you know. What do you mean by that? What should I be doing? It always comes down to those four things I mentioned before, okay? You see me doing this. You see me going in this direction. So you want me to go in another direction because you have come to the conclusion I'm not going about doing what I'm doing the correct way. I'm just giving this as an illustration. That applies to anybody, all right? So, and when a person says, hey, you're kind of making a mistake here. First of all, you want clarity on what mistake are you making. And then you want the cure for the mistake that you're making. And you get that by asking questions. You don't push back on anybody. You just want clarity on what they're talking about. And you do that by asking questions. What do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? And once you get clarity, then you ask, okay, what should I do that I'm not doing that will get me to the place that I'm trying to go?
Yes.
That's all it is.
That's all it is.
And let the person lead you. See, if Neely Fuller says that you are doing something you shouldn't be doing, Neely Fuller should know what it is you should be doing and has run tests on it and has found out that what he's telling you will work.
Okay.
All right? And a lot of people will say, you know, they'll have you doing stuff, and they haven't even tested the stuff that they want you to do themselves.
Now, that is the truth.
All right? Now, a lot of people will do that. See,
yes.
But you don't, sometimes they're not aware that they're doing it. All right?
Sometimes. That's true. That's true.
Yeah, but all you got to do is just ask them, what do you want me to do? It always comes down to the doing part.
The 4 wants, yeah.
Yeah, the 4 wants. It always, go with the 4 wants. You'll never get lost.
Hey,
Nobody
that's code,
will get
baby.
lost.
That's code.
That's why we need a code.
That's why we need a code.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you there, Toussaint. You know better. You better not be a stranger. Before we get to Nicholas and then the code, which is going to be our last two, add this to your movie list, Mr. Fuller. Bug's Life. My West Coast brother out there, Swaz, said this, that he just watched the film with one of his students. He says it's a good film to teach about racism, white supremacy, and counter-racist logic. Man, I like that. I like the way that sounds. Okay, Nicholas in Newport News, Virginia. You're on with Mr. Fuller. What's your question?
How are you all doing today?
Good, sir. What's your question for Mr. Fuller?
Well, that wasn't the main question, but well,
okay.
Mr. Fuller, my main question was, if this program and the books are aimed to end the system of racism, white supremacy, is it just refined? I don't want to confuse the question, but is it the refined racism tactics to allow this broadcast and things like that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I mean, we're in a prison.
Yeah, thank you.
So when you hear Neely Fuller talking, the white supremacist says, let Neely Fuller talk. And the fact that, you know, we still have racism, that's all the white supremacists care about. They don't care what Neely Fuller says or nobody else says. They let all them black people just say whatever they want to say, as long as we still got white supremacy at the beginning of each day. As long as we got black people running around in a circle, as long as we got black people don't know what to do about nothing except kill each other. I mean, hey, what do we care about what Neely Fuller or anybody else says? All the black preachers, all the black judges, I mean, you know, make them judge. Make all of them judges.
Tell the truth,
as long as you got the system of white supremacy, we don't care.
Say it. That's the truth. I'm sorry. He just said the truth there. You're up there partying because they got the black judge up there. Look who's still in charge. Go ahead with your other question, brother.
Well, that really was the main question, because I was only asking because if it is allowed, then if there was a system or they did see something, you said they'll tighten up on it, they'll make sure they eradicate it quickly, then what would you say is the most recent thing they've gotten rid of, the supremacists? In your opinion, what's the most recent thing that has been effective against the system that they've seen erased from at least the last 20, 30 years of our memory?
Oh, well, all the black people. See, that's why I don't want to go away from this program belittling things like the black lady who is now a judge and all like that. No, she works hard for all like that. But the white supremacists say, we're going to put some black faces up front. They did this with President Obama. They say, now's the time. It used to be every black face to the back. We don't want to see your black face in nothing, not in the movies or nothing like that, unless it's somewhere in the back, way in the background, okay? Then, after the 1960s, black people kicking up a stir, all right? They looked at it. They went to the drawing board. They're very scientific. They say, we'll little by little put black faces up front. We'll just put 1 or 2 black faces up front every 15 or 20 years. And black people will be so grateful that they're seeing themselves sitting on the front seat of anything. Don't make no difference what it is. I mean, a dog show or whatever, okay? Just put them because they're not used to being up front. See, so, and then at a certain point, we will say, just like in any movie that you're making. Okay, places, please, or stage play. All black people down front. All right, you know your place. It used to be all black people to the back of the bus, to the back of everything. Now we want all black faces at every award ceremony, black people to the front. You know your places. Your place is wherever I tell you, okay?
Wherever I tell you. That's right.
Now, you're sitting there on front, and you're grinning from ear to ear because you feel like you have arrived in heaven because I told you that you are no longer on the back seat, you're on the front seat. Isn't that wonderful? And so we sitting there grinning and say, okay, and maybe for another 50 years while we grin, we say, well, wait a minute. What's the difference between being on the back seat and being on a front seat of a bus that's going nowhere?
On a going nowhere. That's right. What's that old expression, Mr. Fuller? The more things change, the more things seem to stay the same.
Anything they come up with, look out. Here they come again. What does the code say? Here they come again.
Here they
what
come
are they
again.
up to now?
And then we talk about where the white
that's
folks
a question.
go.
What are they up to? You know they up to something.
Yeah.
And it's going to look real good on the surface. But in maybe 50 years, you'll say, wait a minute, I've been took again.
I've been took again, Where'd the white folks go? Thank you, Nicholas in Newport News. Okay, here we go. We're going to Chi-Town, and she called a couple of times. Glad she's in here. Let's go with Nicole. Nicole, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning,
turn
Mr.
that
Bobby.
down in the
Good
background,
morning, Mr.
sweetie.
Fuller.
Okay, there you go.
Good morning. I had it was maybe semi-question. I wanted to know if Mr. Fuller ever looked at a little short kind of film called The New Black Mind, The Only Language on Earth by Dr. Kwame, last name AKU. And it was, and I thank Mr. Fuller for getting my brain moving again, because I looked at that film and it was talking about what Mr. Fuller talked about the first hour, about changing language sometimes. And it was just teaching you, if you knew root words, that you can be able to change language and slip knowledge into different conversations. So I was just wondering if Mr. Fuller had heard of that or even looked at that film. And then I really want to thank Mr. Fuller for keeping my juices flowing in my brain to be able to address counter-racism.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you so much. Ms. Fuller?
Well, that sounds like a BGQ, and I appreciate your appreciation, her appreciation, but it's not me. I'm just the vehicle. I'm trying to get everybody who's listening to this program all the time to stay focused on what? Not Neely Fuller, and not so much his book, even though my book is a vehicle, but it's a vehicle for logic. Logic came with the universe. If we tap into that, I mean, everything just falls in place. But what is logic? Cause and effect. And what is cause and effect about, to keep from this going from this one set of words to another? Constructive results. If at the end of the day, you started out with a problem, and at the end of the day, see, I'm trying to make it as explicit as I possibly can. What is codification really about? It's about when you wake up in the morning, most likely you have a problem. By the end of that day, you want that problem solved.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
Yes,
if
sir.
black people can just fix on that, we got it all. You wake up in the morning with a problem, maybe two problems, maybe three. At the end of that day, you want all three of those problems solved, and probably the problems that you were anticipating you might have, you might squeeze in a couple of more extras before the day is. Hey, so you started out with 4 problems, and you were anticipating you're going to have a couple of problems the next day. You wind up in that one day taking care of 10 problems.
Okay.
All right? So that's how the black mind should be. That's all we got to do to get codification in a nutshell, you might say.
Okay.
That's all codification is about. Problem solving.
About.
What problem?
Okay.
Whatever problem you got. Because the theory is this. You solve the problem of each individual black person, you have solved the problem of all black people. That's just pure math. That's
period.
Kindergarten math. That's
okay.
That's below kindergarten math.
All right. This is what I want to do, Mr. Fuller, before we have to go. Could you please, one more time, give that the closing of the CRT for those that may not have heard it, just briefly, just went over those points because it's so rich and so pure. Your thoughts on it, like you did when you opened up the program, closed the program last week, and spoke about last week. CRT.
Well, I'm just saying CRT. You have your own CRT, and that's anything else that comes up. Invent your own language. And you don't have to go and study Swahili if you don't already know Swahili. If you know Swahili, well, you can do it in Swahili. But language is fluid anyway. One language flows into another. People who make dictionaries, a lot of people don't know this. I was way out of high school before I even heard it about lexicographers. It never even occurred to me, and it should have occurred to me the first day in school. Who makes dictionaries? And who gives them the authority to make a dictionary? Where do you get the authority to make a dictionary using words that everybody's going to use? Where do you get the authority to do that? You get the authority from whoever's using words. That's where it comes from. Lexicographers, they are people who make dictionaries. You ask them, where do you get the words to put into the dictionary? They said, from listening to people talk. I didn't know that. I was way out of high school before, and I said, doggone it, I've been treating the dictionary like it's greater than the Bible. All right? Well, Webster's dictionary says, and Webster himself will say, I don't make up words. I just go around and listen to the way people talk. And if they use the word ain't, it's going to be in my dictionary. Why? Because people are using it. So you can make up any kind of word you want to. A word is nothing but a tool. And black people really need to know this because we're getting pretty good with words. I mean, we couldn't write all these songs and whatnot. So, but we got to understand, we don't have to wait for the white supremacists to tell us what a word means. We can take a word that they came up with and give it our own definition, like I've done with the word America. And American is what? And I'm going to brush past CRT because I'm going to try to make a bigger point here.
Well, we only got a minute and 40 seconds to go. I've
been trying to get people to stop using the word America with the word America, racism altogether. Why? Because there is no connection at all. America and racism are not connected. Get that in our minds and start using it that way. An American doesn't mistreat anyone. Racism is about mistreatment. So you don't have no Americans. You can't have people mistreating people, and those people don't even exist. Americans don't exist yet. That's something that is an idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
right.
Well, we got to close the show out because we're under a minute. So thank you, Mr.
Fuller.
Right. Thank you, callers, for calling in.
And get the book, too. ProduceJustice.com.
Make sure you get the book by going to ProduceJustice.com. And all the information for the show and other information, like when Mr. Fuller is going to be on another show, in particular the Carl Nelson Show, all that will be up on our website at ProduceJustice.com and Mr. Fuller's official Facebook page. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Fuller, and we hope to see you next week. Thank you, and everybody have a good week.